with our famous celebrity author, Darwin Porter. And Darwin is calling in or viewing in from Staten Island. What's going on in Staten Island, Darwin?
Well, we just had one of the worst storms in history. So Noah's Ark up here right now. But the whole country is in distress. And
I know. Poor California, I can't believe it.
Right before we went on, I just watched the latest films coming out of Oregon, and it is really on fire. The homes are burning down. It looks like Berlin in April of 1945. And I feel great sympathy. I love the people there. My mother used to live there, and I visited often, and I just find that first this pandemic, and then Portland has been under stress for the last 100 days. So Oregon, poor Oregon, and firefighters from Florida are flying in to help these poor people. And so I extend my sympathy to them.
Well, the good news, Darwin, is that we don't have a hurricane looming out there, and Florida is doing very well right now.
I am so glad that somebody is. I've been hearing from film and nation historians, and they're now calling this the summer of 2020 when America went crazy. And that's how this summer will be written up, allegedly.
You know, Darwin, it's interesting though. We've all been, I've really been so sad that global warming hasn't taken the high priority, but now they see what it is. It's not coming, it's here. It's here, and that's what's happening in California. So, and some of the other places. So I hope that this awakens everybody.
You're right. It hit 30 years before people predicted. And but now, in spite of all these natural disasters, the hurricane that swept through Louisiana, America is still continuing its cultural fights. And I want to update you on that, including two recent movements. One is ban the Bible. I don't know if you've heard about that yet.
No, I haven't.
Well, some people have gone through the Bible, and I was unaware of this until recently, but there are many sections in the Bible that says, slave, obey your master. And some people don't like that. I mean, why should they? And I didn't know about these things. Now, I don't think the Bible is going to be banned, although there is insisting that maybe when they reprint it, and they reprint the Bible all the time, they'll remove all those references about slave, obey your master. So moving on from the Bible.
But wait, before you move on, see, immediately I thought of it as women having masters, not as blacks. For me.
Well, it wasn't necessarily, these slaves back then could be white too.
Okay, I see.
In fact, many of them were white, but I didn't know that about, well, maybe I'm not a great biblical scholar, but I didn't know about this. Now, there's another movement to get rid of the word America. And there are reasons for that, allegedly. One is, as we know from school, it was named after Amerigo Vespucci, or Pucci. There are three ways to pronounce his name. And why do people want to get rid of his name? Well, he was a slave owner. I've done some research on him. He had 5 household slaves, as many rich men of that day did. He never was a slave trader, like people said. Of course, some people thought the New World should be called Columbus and not America. And he is a man of mystery. He made 2 voyages to America, maybe 4. It's so amazing how little is known about him. He did arrive in Brazil on the coast, where he met headhunters and they grabbed one of his men and roasted the man for dinner.
Oh.
And later they found out that the man cannibalized. The chief of the tribe gets the genitals to eat. That always goes to the, so it's called Welcome to the New World. So, but it's amazing. Ralph Waldo Emerson said he was just a pickle peddler and a total dishonest man. He allegedly wrote 6 letters, and then they say those letters were really written by his publisher, and a lot was made up about him. He's one of the most mysterious figures in history. I don't think the movement to get rid of the name America, that meant American, North, Central, and South. I don't think that movement will go on.
I don't think so either.
Long. But it's.
I don't think so either.
I don't think the Bible is going to be banned. But Native Americans are now rising up, and you've read about the Cleveland Indians, and the Washington Redskins,
right?
And they've not been renamed yet, but that's in the air, and so it's like Native Americans want to get in. There is some movement on that, and it's beginning with John Wayne. Now, John Wayne is the most famous cowboy star who made cowboy and Indians movies. I've seen dozens of them. And there is a depiction of Indians that they were called back then. It's certainly unattractive. I mean, they're getting killed by the cowboys and later the cavalrymen. And the Europeans were moving in to take over a new continent. But that's been true in the history of the world. Many stronger people have moved in and taken over for someone who didn't defend their land. They were defending their land and they lost. And that's why we have Oregon, California, Colorado, and there is a belief that Indians are depicted the way that African Americans have been in previous films. There's a great deal, and I wrote a column about this, mentioned this in the Boomer Times. I oppose censorship. I mean, I think they should let John Wayne movies still be shown. I mean, they're part of the American history. Yes, they often depict, some of them depicted Indians very favorably. But most
Well, Darwin, you had that column where you talked about Gone with the Wind. They're wanting to change this star, this most famous movie.
Yes, that's absolutely true, but they're compromising on that. They may have a 5-minute show before they show Gone with the Wind, explaining that slavery was not exactly as depicted in the movie. But a lot of going back to history. I'll give you an example. Theodore Roosevelt is coming under stress here in New York. And for example, for decades, a statue of him has stood in front of the Natural History Museum. Well, Roosevelt does not have a exactly perfect record. I mean, he was a great president, but maybe his record with the Native Americans or even Black people have not been too good. And so they've had to remove the statue of him in front of the Natural History Museum. And his statue in Central Park has been covered in red paint and horrible.
I didn't know that. Didn't know any of that.
Horrible graffiti has been, a lot. Oh, we're becoming a city of graffiti. And now, as far as I'm concerned with Theodore Roosevelt, this comes home to me next week because my publisher is entertaining a direct descendant of Theodore Roosevelt. And she's a brilliant engineer, a woman who lives in Raleigh, North Carolina, and is coming here to supervise a big engineering product. And I have a great portrait of Theodore Roosevelt that I'm now hanging in the hall. And I have 3 books on Theodore, or the Rough Rider, that I'm putting on the coffee table. So we will not be banning Theodore Roosevelt in this house. As you may know from my previous broadcasts, that I have read up on all American presidents, written about 5 of them, and all their first ladies. And everybody has a difficult problem. There's only one president, our first lady, that I think totally passes the smell test of them all, and that's Eleanor Roosevelt. She seems to have an unblemished record about all civil rights. For example, she looms large in history after she became First Lady. In 1948, she presided at the United Nations, and over Soviet objections, she passed the first human rights charter ever written in the entire world. And they say for that alone, she will live in history. Now, we go into all the other presidents and we run into problems. They're cleaning up Confederate statues, and I could understand that, even though I grew up in North Carolina where there was a big Confederate statue in my hometown. I passed it every day on the way to school. They're going to keep it there. They refused to.
And who is that? Who is that?
Robert E. Lee. It was of Robert E. Lee, who was a great hero in the South. Unfortunately, I'm not really for tearing down statues. I think you could go through historical commissions and make your case. Maybe you don't have to tear them all down and set fires, but this shows the real violence. Now, the movement, the one thing I didn't understand is why people attack the statues of Ulysses S. Grant. And I mean, he was the general of the Union Army. And also the statue of Abraham Lincoln is being attacked. I was surprised that General Grant and Abraham Lincoln, I thought they might be heroes or something, but I can't, it's very difficult to judge. There is a movement to change the name of Washington, and I don't think that will go over. It's
please.
Well, Washington was a slave owner, it's true, and so was Madison. And a great attack on Thomas Jefferson. The New York Times recently ran an article written by an African American who was a direct descendant of Sally, Hemings. She was a slave owned by Thomas Jefferson, and they had 6 children together. And so this gentleman, who is now an author, he wants at the statue at the Jefferson Memorial to be removed and replaced with, say, Harriet Tubman, who was a pioneer African-American woman who helped free many slaves. I don't think that will go. Nancy Pelosi is not going to remove Washington and Jefferson from the House, although she did remove all the Confederate portraits. But it's very interesting with all these climate changes and fires and pandemics that we're still fighting a lot of wars, and you just almost can't go back in history and find somebody who has a perfect record. Well, wait a minute. Benjamin Franklin is coming out pretty well. He opposed slavery, but many of those early Americans had slaves, but you don't think they'll change the name of Washington, do you?
No, but Darwin, I just want everyone to know, because I always allow you to keep talking because we have so short a time, but this is Darwin Porter. He has written probably 35 books, maybe more. He's got more books in his brain than anybody. and he's coming out with a few more very shortly. But Darwin lives in Staten Island, and he and Danforth Prince they are co-authors of many books, and Darwin has a long history of being with Boomer Times and of our being on the radio. But I want to just change the subject in a way. We can stay with presidents.
I just want to say one thing.
Okay, go ahead.
Yesterday, I counted, and they're listed in every book I write. I counted the number, and I am now on my 63rd
Are you kidding?
Well, they're all listed there.
63?
63, this autumn will be 63, but and then hundreds of travel books, really hundreds.
Amazing.
Someone said, how many travel books did you write? And I can't count that high, but for example, I don't know how to count them because, say, the book on England went into 50 different editions. The book I wrote in 1960 had nothing to do with the book I wrote in 2013. So how many do you count that one, or do you count that 50?
Well, of course, because they're all edited. But let me ask you then, so all these books, let's go back to when you first started writing them. You did this on a Peck and Peck typewriter?
Yes, which I still use.
Do you really? You don't use a computer to type?
No, I do not.
Oh, then it's even more incredible that you write so many books. Do you write them out in longhand?
Oh, goodness, no. Like,
Okay.
That's what Nathaniel Hawthorne did. No, I was, I'm sounding like I'm bragging now. In 1957, I was the champion typist of Dade County. They helped.
Oh, wow.
And back then, men were not, they didn't take typing classes, although I wanted to be a reporter. So I figured before I went to work for the Miami Herald, they wanted someone, you had to be able to type a story. And I took to typing, and it's getting harder and harder for me to find I have tried a computer, but I don't have what is called a light touch. So I sort of am used to pounding that typewriter. I'm amazed that I did all those books because I spent most of my time traveling the world. I find it amazing, but because I think in biography, the leading person who wrote, I think he wrote 28 books, but that took him 50 years. So
who was that?
A man named James Robert Parry.
Oh, okay.
He
you don't
worked,
know him.
Well, no, I don't know him, but he worked for Photoplay magazine. So many of his books were sort of like picked up from Photoplay. I did it, but I don't know how I did it, and I'm still doing it.
Yeah, I know you are. Well, because that's really who you are. You don't run around like a lot of people, you don't have big parties.
But I did. I did.
You did? When you were in Key West, I know.
Well, no, for 50 years, I ran all over the world.
Yeah, I know.
With the former guides. That job lasted from 1960 to 2013.
Amazing.
But now the guidebook industry has, well, like so many industries,
of course,
is in dire trouble. So it's good that I switched to
So let me propose a question. As you were talking, I was thinking about this. We keep talking about the presidents. How about their wives? And I know we've covered that sometimes, but and I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, you probably do, but other than Nancy Reagan, who else was divorced?
Well, Nancy Reagan was not divorced. I mean,
Nancy was she was divorced. Yes. She was a divorcee before she married.
I'll tell you that. I wrote a book called Love Triangle, and it was about Ronald Reagan in his youth, and he was married to Jane Wyman.
Oh yeah, that's who I'm trying.
Yeah, he was married to Jane Wyman, and they had a great love affair, although neither one was very faithful to each other. And she finally dumped him. for Lou Ayres. She made a movie with him called Johnny Belinda. She won an Oscar, and she told Reagan, "Get lost, kid." And he hooked up with Marilyn Monroe, and he met her, and they had an affair. And then he had an affair and was going to marry Doris Day, who just recently died. And then he was still seeing Nancy Davis on the side. And Nancy called him and said, "I'm knocked up." And of course, that was Patty Davis was being birthed. And Reagan did the honorable thing and told Doris, take a sentimental journey, and que sera, sera, and I have to marry Nancy because I'm a gentleman. And
okay, so am I wrong? So were there any president's wives who were divorced?
No.
There weren't.
Never.
Whoa.
There were two that lost their wives and remarried, like John Tyler. He lost his wife and remarried in the White House, and but then Trump has the most divorces. He has the record of so it's Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. But the
over
other,
the men, but no women. That's a very interesting thing.
No
Unlike England.
No, women didn't, except for my grandmother, women didn't get divorced very much in our history. Now, that doesn't mean that, for example, the Eleanor Roosevelt and Franklin, they stayed married, but they moved on to other
Right.
shall we say, friends.
Yes. I just saw a whole thing on Eleanor and Franklin, and how he really wanted her to be with him, but she had more important things to do.
Well, she was a very, by the way, I loved her. I got to meet her in the last 2 years, and I'm a devotee of Mrs. Roosevelt, and but there'll be no one like her. Our recent first ladies don't come anywhere near. I've written about first ladies. I wrote about Hillary Clinton and
Yes.
Nancy Davis, later Reagan, and I also wrote about a woman named Hillary Clinton. And I've written not very much about the present First Lady, but I wrote about the first Mrs. Trump and the second Mrs. Trump in my book on Donald Trump. So I've written about First Ladies, but never a book on Eleanor Roosevelt, which had been my dream, but now it's too big a project for me to take on.
Well, but so let's go to the men then. You just said that. So the only men who've had second wives, whether it's from divorce or death, are just those two?
Well, yeah, because most of them came into the White House. They were already married, because in the 19th century, men got married, particularly if they're going to run for president. John Tyler, as I said, he lost his wife, and he married a woman named Julia Gardner, who actually stayed in my home here. Her mother died, and she was getting, she was fighting with her brother over the estate on Staten Island. So she stayed here for 3 months while she was fighting her brother. And because she had Confederate sympathies, the jury ruled against her because, she had connections in Virginia. And at that time, that would be like being a Nazi, In fact, her mother once put a Confederate flag in the front yard, and that would be like me putting a Nazi flag in 1942. Right. Not a good thing to do.
No, not a good thing. Well, you certainly, you are like a machine, in a sense, a memory machine that you, do you take memory pills, Darwin?
Well, no, I don't. But I'll tell you, every day I add a new name to my repertoire, and it's getting harder and harder to remember. You know, for example, I've just finished Judy Garland and Liza Minnelli. They brought
Yes.
a whole new set. I'm doing now Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. It's a whole new set of people. And I keep adding to my repertoire of names. So it takes me a while sometimes. Who was that man who appeared in a 1938 movie with John Wayne? Oh yes, Claire Trevor. But I notice as you get older, I don't have quite that recall I did. You know, I hesitate every now and then. Eventually it will come to me, but I used to just rat-a-tat-tat, and they say that happens as you get older. It gets harder and harder to, but then adding all these new names to my list, I think I'm like an encyclopedia. You think
You are.
just in those 63 books, look at all the names that appeared. You just wrote a book, one of the best-selling I've ever done, on Jackie Kennedy Onassis. She had lots of names and family and to remember, but it's all in the book. At least I get it right in the book.
Is that still your most sought after book of all your
Yes,
books?
I'm going to come out with a new edition, and
Really?
the second one was I'm coming out with a new edition on Marilyn Monroe. In fact, it was interesting. Publishers said, don't write about Jackie Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe because they've been written to death. The publishers were wrong.
Yes.
And the third bestseller they told me not to do was a woman named Elizabeth Taylor. And those are my, so I think it's time now to come out with new editions. I'll have to get up even earlier in the morning.
So before we run out of time, I have another question. We have so many books now coming out about Melania, about Trump, people, and I'm sure that happened with other presidents and people.
Not like this. Not like this. There are more books now. My book is called Donald Trump, the Man Who Would Be King. And there is, what is different in my book, I don't write about his being president. I wrote about the founding of the Trump dynasty. The Frederick Trump went on the gold rush selling whores and dead horse meat. And he came back in 1900 with $400,000, which back then would be worth millions today. And that was the Trump dynasty. So I wrote about how the dynasty was founded, Fred Trump, the father, the builder, and Donald Trump's journey into real estate and all the controversy. And I wrote about his falling in love with Lady Di and his many girlfriends and lovers and his fascination with Madonna, a lot of things you don't know about.
Excuse me, did he or his lawyers try to get you not to publish that book?
Yes, they did. There was a great attempt to suppress it. It seems ridiculous now because everything has been written about the president, but back then it was considered and it came out in September of 2016, 2 months before the election. But the last line in the book, Donald Trump tells someone, he says, my new address will be 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So my book ended on he turned out to be a prophet, didn't he? That's his new address. And I also wrote about the making of the president, how he slayed all of those, the one woman, I think, just one, and the men to become, the Republican nominee. He had to get rid of a lot of competition. You may remember those debates. There was a whole state.
I do remember. There
was
were
a
17 of them up there, and he
and,
took each one. Yeah.
but
But
he
let me also then ask you, the people who are writing, they did try to stop them from publishing, but they were unsuccessful.
yes
His aunt,
he,
his
he
sister, all these people.
I've studied libel laws, and a president, and Hillary Clinton found this out too. You almost cannot libel a president anymore. I mean, you could almost write, for example, Lyndon Johnson. There were several books out that he was plotted the assassination of John F. Kennedy, but that's a very libelous remark. But as Lady Bird Johnson found out, you can't, a judge told Elizabeth Taylor filed a lawsuit on libel, and a judge told her, Miss Taylor, everything in the world has been written about you. You can't be libeled anymore, Miss Taylor. And so
that's it.
when you become a figure so prominent, you lose a great deal of the protection of libel. If you're a private person, you have a great chance. But if you're a public figure like a president, I mean, Hillary, there's a book now that she's a child molester, running a pedophile ring.
Oh, I know.
But she's not going to sue. And everything is said about Biden. And so don't go into politics if you want to keep your privacy. Have I talked too long?
No, we only have about a minute and a half left, but this has been very interesting because this is the first time that I have seen so many books written about a president, and they go on TV, they go everywhere, and they say it's true, but people, it's a book, and I guess they will be selling a lot of books. I don't buy those kind of books, so that doesn't appeal to me.
Happened before. And I think whatever happens, he's going to be the most written about president in history, good or bad. There are many books praising
you're right.
him, but otherwise that belonged to John F. Kennedy. He had more books.
Oh, is that right?
Written about him than even George Washington. There are many, many books including Girlfriends, One Boyfriend. Many, many, many books about John F. Kennedy, but Trump has him beat already.
Yeah, well, it's very different nowadays too, as you said. Things are different today, but what's going on? This is a whole new world we're living in. So we started off talking about the global warming and what's happening, and hopefully, when I talk to you next time, Darwin Porter, we will have good news. That maybe the fires have stopped, the snow has come, and things will be better. And I hope that everything's good for you in Staten Island. And I always look forward to your columns. I know you're working on one now for our October issue. And say hello to Dan for me, because he's always there supporting everything you're doing, just like my Dan is doing the same thing. We have good days.
He's getting ready. I'll be real quick. I don't know if I mentioned it. Next week, he will be entertaining, did I tell you, a direct descendant of Theodore Roosevelt. So he's.
Oh no, that's right. Well, you will tell us about that next time. But
getting ready to receive this brilliant engineer. And
Thank you very much.
Women become engineers too.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah, we engineer the family. That's all right. So Darwin, thank you again for taking your time, and we'll be talking to you.
You look like a movie star.
All right. Well, you always make me feel so good. We're the same age, remember that?
Yes, that's one thing I remember.
I remember that too. That's one thing I remember. Darwin Porter, you're just such a delight, and I'm waiting for your next book. I know you're working on that.
Yes. I'll see you soon. I'll see you soon.
Okay, and we'll talk to you very soon.
God bless.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.